Young Rabbi trembled from cold in the night, trying to understand where and why they were taken in this dirty cart. Their eyes were barely closing, and they themselves huddled together, trying to warm up. Suddenly, the night cut a terrible roar. A huge dragon called. The girls are full of hope for salvation. To find out what fate has prepared this incredible adventure world, be sure to watch the video to the end and support the author liked. Tokyo's best hand-to-hand wizard promised his most talented student to give everything he has if he can defeat him in a duel. He urged the student not to delay and move into the attack. After tense training, Ramamix Hasiba replied that his offer to his liking. He really was interested in finding out what else he can surprise his mentor. The art school was an ideal place not only for body improvement, but also for spiritual growth. The young man rapidly attacked and struck a number of blows with a sword, but the master confidently restrained this pressure. The teacher asked if Roma really decided to finish with the master. The young man replied that the mentor himself has repeatedly emphasized, in the battle it is impossible to show mercy even to his own parents. He agreed, and added that all his techniques were designed to destroy the enemy with one blow. But for this, you need to fully open and overcome the protection of the enemy. Saito asked Rima whether she was ready to step on this dangerous path. The girl, who got bored with their duel, remarked Saito and Rami that the breakfast is cold, so it would be nice to stop these games with the sword and not waste time. She joked that there was nothing funnier than fun with the old Shido. The teacher just smiled gently in response, and the girl added, "Why spend time on these duels?" Replied that they actually try to kill each other during a duel. But the bitch just laughed in response and asked. Saito laughed at the girl's reaction and joked that Asuka obviously liked to play with the couple with Remedies. Rima immediately blushed and began to justify her grandfather, explaining that she had only friendly relationships with Asuka. But Saito Vaster denied a smile. To explain such obvious things is senseless, because Asuka comes here and prepares breakfasts not only from friendship, especially when Rima is nearby. It is unlikely that Asukui may have a romantic relationship, because Rima is too shy and does not notice the girls around themselves. The shadow sharply changed the tone and seriously stated that if Rima really wants to protect something, he should act more decisively. Even the slightest pity cannot be exhibited to the opponent. Rima thanked for the advice and promised to remember it. The old man ordered him not to suffer, but Rima replied that such a grandfather should not underestimate him. Asuka is already accustomed to the endless disputes between the king and the flight attendant. School romance returns again. This time, the class of the class suggested entering the karate club. However, Rama, as always, she immediately started talking about the many advantages of joining the club and even promised to help with her studies if Rama agrees to present their class in the competition. Classmates are already used to such scenes, because this guy was constantly received. He was a high and strong physique. So many classmates envied him and dreamed of being in his place, because it was the invitation to join different school clubs regularly. I remembered the guidance of Master Saito, who taught me to be ruthless and destroy the enemy with one lightning blow. The Saito master owned effective and dangerous techniques, and Ramala was well aware of it. Waiting for a moment of rest from affairs, the AD decided to have a snack, and mentally thanked the Asucha for a wonderful lunch, which she prepared with love, as always. In fact, he liked loneliness, and he realized that he would not be able to join the sports club in martial arts. In the end, if he suddenly gets too involved, can accidentally kill someone, and deprive the life of a person who does not want to kill you, is a terrible mistake that you can find yourself in prison. Suddenly, Ramif felt strange, as if everything he saw in front of him began to flicker and swim. He continued to eat instantly, but was already in a completely different place surrounded by strangers. The soldiers called a man. Having made an unnecessary movement of his hands, he immediately ordered the curse on Reimu. The schoolboy watched it in confusion. He looked at people in a strange outfit with weapons in his hands, and realized that he was definitely not his school. Everything around looked threatening, so Reimu decided to take advantage of suddenness to gain an advantage. Again, the words of the old Saito sounded in the head of Remy, who did not tire of reminding. If you want to protect something truly valuable, you cannot show pity against the enemy. Smiling as soon as possible, he stretched out a soldier with a food box, inviting you to taste. The soldier was confused, and this moment became fatal for him. The lightning speed struck several deadly blows and took over the sword within a few seconds. The soldier turned out to be more experienced and effortlessly evaded the abandoned weapon, but Rimac immediately shortened the distance and struck him with a deadly blow to his neck. The soldier was already rushing, but Rimac immediately snatched the blade lying on the floor and cut his chest to the enemy. Meanwhile, the magician in the hood was in a hurry to complete the spell, and the last warrior was desperate to repel. The magician spoke much louder, which was incredibly annoyed by Remus. At this time, he was already prepared to repel the warrior's attack, but the first attacked the magician, releasing the spell of the storm arrow. Within a few seconds, the angry magician could not believe his eyes. Ramao remained alive, and also cleverly hid behind the body of the warrior, using it as a living shield. He did not even have time to think, as the next devastating blow broke his ribs, and sharp debris pierced his right leg. Looking at the old man, he asked where he was and what was going here. The mighty Getsi, engulfed in burning pain, realized that he could not use magic in this condition. Then he realized that he was in Ramen, in the west of the central continent, namely in the royal palace of the Ultimer Empire. The old man explained to the affected guy that he had caused Remus from another world. The bald magician could not understand as evil. I did not waste time and immediately asked him how to get out of this horrible place and get home faster. Grandpa was breathing hard, and fear was red from his gaze, because he saw. Gayez believed that if he managed to conquer this mighty stranger, then to gain power over the entire central continent would be a completely achievable purpose. The insidious magician decided to pull the time, hoping that the guards would have time to come to his aid. He asked the old man what he conceived and why his heart was beating so crazy. It expresses how much he worries. Fig looked at the frightened face of the magician and asked if there was at least some way to bring him back to his native world. Hearing this, Getz faded even more and began to tremble. Feeling that there is no point in lying, he honestly confessed. As far as he knows, it is simply impossible to return Rem home. Meanwhile, Hetz felt his lung gradually recovering and decided that if he managed to distract this guy, a chance to kill him would appear. It was at this moment that he began to annoy the meaningless rules of this world, where sorcerers can cause a living creature but are not able to turn it back. When he asked why he was called to this world, because he was only an ordinary schoolboy, the sorcerer Geths explained that residents of another world have an extremely high ability to absorb. In this world, if you kill a person or any other creature, you can absorb their power. At this point, Ramen noticed that the bald old again suddenly rushed forward, trying to attack. The guy immediately reacted and drove the insidious sorcerer with his knee into the stomach. He was stunned, being in a completely different world. At the same time, the guy felt relieved, because, having committed his murder at home, he would inevitably threaten his arrest. Now Saria, the granddaughter of the main magician, perceived a long call ceremony with indignation and tried to break through the protection. However, the guards did not allow the girl to go through, strictly warned her that it was strictly forbidden. After all, the call of people from the other world is the most secret and dangerous art that requires absolute focus and lack of outside influence. Ralph asked Saria not to worry and wait a little, but the girl only answered with anxiety that she could not calm down. She was worried about her grandfather, because even one of his mistakes can lead to a catastrophe. Her neighbor, Hera, finally stopped shouting and apologizing for her unreasonable behavior. Rolf also apologized for his words and explained that everyone was looking forward to the end of the ceremony. Ralph noted that he understands Sarah's excitement because it is connected by blood ties with her great-grandfather. However, the girl noted that even the strongest magicians could be mistaken and insisted on the right with the inheritance. Rolf agreed and ordered the guards to depart until Sarah was preparing. Using magic, you can create an explosive spell that crashes into massive doors with a powerful force, enveloping them with flames. The huge metal doors were almost not succumbed. They just made a little bitter. Then Syria struck the second blow, taking advantage of the cold this time. The metal cracked and flew into many debris. Ralph mentally praised the girl for her smartness. Without moving, they rushed to the room, and Saria immediately begged Ralph as soon as possible to find her grandfather as soon as possible. Everyone was stunned by a terrible picture. The room was filled with the bodies of fallen soldiers and residents of Syria. She shouted and rushed to the older magician Gatsu, but Saria immediately realized, too late, her grandfather was not breathing. One of the soldiers suddenly exclaimed that he had found a surviving. The bloody warrior was barely audible, whispering that they attacked a monster, and then fled. He orders to bring the burdens immediately and send a wounded soldier to the infirmary. And the boy himself advises to remain silent and protect. Ralph assured the guy that help would come and thanked him for his bravery. But he had no idea that he was faced with a man from another world, who had just taken his first steps in the world of sword and magic through such a bold and cunning act. becoming a crime, Saria was deeply concerned and could not understand what a horrible creation was able to take away her grandfather's life, the head of the royal magicians. Where did this insidious killer go? Who was able to escape from the closed room? It was also surprising that all guards, except for one, died at the hands of a monster without any weapons, and her elf could not think what it was possible. How could all the armed soldiers be exterminated at all? Even for the mighty kingdoms, this was almost unthinkable. The soldiers say that on the bodies of the dead they noticed bruises, similar to traces of fingers, and some nape of the neck were completely crushed. One of the guards was excited about the emergency in the infirmary. It only added surprises to a number of strange events. The farm was really burning, and no one could understand how it happened. After all, such an emergency has never happened here. At that moment, Orlando strolled slowly with the garden, enjoying the charming aroma of flowers. His ears were shouting for help and asking the magician and bringing water. Orlando responded instantly. He decided to find out what happened, where the fire occurred, and what was burning. After reaching the fire center, Master Orlando decided to use the magic of the water element. He called on a powerful water storm to curb the fire. In a few minutes, the flames were completely tamed. Only a single smoldering boards remained at the fire. It was at this moment that the commander of Rolf and Saria arrived at the scene. The commander immediately demanded explanations from the young magician. However, Orlando hastened to assure that he did not understand anything himself and only tried to kill him. The series still could not calm down and demanded an immediate explanation of the events that had happened here. Orlando answered sharply, calling her questions meaningless, because he appeared in this place only a few minutes ago and knew nothing absolutely. Arya said that there was an infirmary for wounded soldiers earlier, and then a fire occurred. The girl wondered if Orlando noticed someone suspicious when he headed here. Orlando replied that he had not seen anyone suspicious. Suddenly, local Dr. Ron Belt appeared and said excitedly, "The strange soldier who was taken to the infirmary was extremely dangerous. He killed Aaron." He said that he was recently brought to him by a seriously wounded soldier who seemed to be between life and death. The irresponsible imperial doctor left a wounded soldier under the supervision of his assistant and son Aaron, and he went to his room to drink. The soldiers of the imperial army were well aware of this bad habit of the chief physician. However, the young nurse reassured the warrior, assuring that despite the young age, Aaron was a capable and talented doctor. Aaron himself not. At that moment, the unexpected thing happened. The excited warrior suddenly cried out loudly, and Aaron saw stunned as the blade was stuck in his neck. The young nurse screamed of horror, and everything was instantly turned into chaos. One only blow. He instantly pacified a young nurse who screamed frantically, and then attacked Aaron, who tried to call for help. The young doctor had no chance of resisting the attacker's strong hands and found himself in a deadly trap. He was horror, and demanded to be released. However, Rima explained that she first needs to answer a very important question. The aliens arrived from the other world, insisted that they were explained how to get out of here. However, Aaron, struck by the terrible death of the people he saw, could not master fear and answer. He squeezed the grip even more, and recalled his key question again. The neck of the neck was adding a motivation to Aaron. A confused young doctor finally pointed to him the way to the right. Hearing this answer, Remus, who had already decided not to leave any witnesses, brought to the end and asked the young doctor an apology for everything that happened. Arrives from the other world, seeking to confuse the traces even more, noticed many different bottles on the medical center shelves. Without hesitation, he decided to start a fight. Anyone who was always drunk suggested that the killer probably used panic and fire to escape, and now you need to act as soon as possible to catch it. Stunned by this story, she asked in surprise who was talking about. But Saria was angry, ordered the young magician to prepare for the spell, and Ralph to immediately go to the royal guard at her order. He tried to find out at least something, but the chief imperial doctor advised the boy not to argue and execute orders. Sarah asked Orlando to use all her skills to discover the enemy, and allowed him to use teleportation. Orlando without hesitation created the right spell, and that did not surprise anyone, because the young magician already reached the 3rd level of skill, and was the most talented student of the late grandfather of Saria. The commander ordered Ralph to use the teleport and go to the barracks to prepare the soldiers. Ralph recommended the girl to obtain permission from His Majesty. Meanwhile, Saria instructed Rondal to trace order in the infirmary. The doctor promised to do everything possible when staying in a destroyed infirmary. Meanwhile, Everyone else disappeared without a trace due to magical teleport. The imperial physician remembered his father's son bitterly, and, not finding a better pleasure, again took a glass. The magic of moving instantly moved Syria simply to the entrance to His Majesty Hall. The guards were stunned by such a bold appearance and immediately demanded explanations. She reminded that it was the entrance to the throne hall, and it was strictly forbidden to appear here with teleportation. Such actions could cost her life. She never thought to retreat and stated strongly that she had urgent cases. She needs to convey her request to the king immediately. They did not dare to fulfill the girl's demand. But Saria exclaimed loudly, which had an extremely important business, and insisted, if the guards would not immediately miss her. In the end, the guards gave way, and the angry girl was in the throne room in a few minutes. Lord Daltonist from the Ultimi Empire was angry because of the girl's behavior, and asked why Sarah allows himself such inadmissible actions in the presence of His Majesty. If it was so urgent, why did the head of the Imperial Magicians not address the king himself? Daltonus was harsh and adamant. He immediately demanded explanations. In the end, tired of loud controversy, the king asked the Supreme Chancellor, "It is enough to look at the first emperor, Weonal Iza." Hart insisted that this girl should be listened to, because Saria made a great effort to make this meeting, so it is not surprising that something unexpected happened. His Majesty disagreed with the emperor and apologized for his sharpness. After that, the ruler, the Weonal, asked Latin the reason for her visit and the purpose of the audience. Syria apologized for her unexpected intervention, and appealed to the emperor to appoint her to command the royal guard. Her distant was stunned by such boldness, and stated that it was impossible. However, the emperor promised to allow the girl to lead the royal guard, if she made convincing arguments. She told him of the horrific events that led to the cruel murder of the head of the imperial magicians and her grandfather, Gaius Vorkland. Now you need to act as soon as possible to find the culprit. Overcoming the path to the exit, Real heard the death of the great magician around people. Only then did he realize that it was about the bald old who called him into this world. He was well aware that the murder of such an influential person would inevitably attract unwanted attention to him. That is why, as soon as he was behind the city gate, he decided from another world. He explained to the old man that in his world people do not fight with swords or spears at all, so there is no point in calling him to this world. He testified that among people there are those who have a unique gift to become the most outstanding warriors of this magical world. It is in this ability that their true value is. In addition, they told about the possibility of strengthening their power by killing other creatures. At that moment, Rien realized that he was probably able to absorb other people's abilities. The story of the magician about the dragons finally convinced Rem that he was in a completely different world. Now he just had to find out what to do next. In the usual visiting guest, he praised himself for a reasonable act, to leave a soldier's uniform outside the city. Now, those who pursue him will not have the idea that he just stays in the center and has a quiet dinner in a local tavern. For the money taken from the dead, Romab bought himself new clothes and thought about further plans. Suddenly, the hostess of the tavern approached him and wondered if he was really a traveler, because she did not remember that he would ever meet him here. One of the impressive bartender raised Remy a huge mug of cold beer, although the guy did not order it. The woman explained that she almost left without rest, so it would be great to drink together. The friendly owner of the establishment confessed that she would like to treat a nice guy. However, Romero suddenly realized how funny he was. He was only 16, so, a little ashamed, he replied that it puts him in an uncomfortable position. In the end, he thanked for the treat and made a few sips. The guy realized that through intense workouts look much older than his years. It turns out that he has to take an adult. The woman looked carefully at the guest and said that he was a good man, and was surprised that he decided to stay. She confessed that she rarely hears someone to be called a well-educated person, so remains are undoubtedly a polite and friendly guy. She then suggested that for Rema it was the first visit to the imperial capital, so it looks a little scattered. The young man confirmed that it was so, and even added that his parents recently died of a serious illness. He immediately apologized to mentioning sad events, but the guy assured that he should not worry, because he had already resigned himself to the loss. Now his thoughts are busy with others. He would like to try to settle in this city. So I wondered if you could find a good job here. He noted that he possesses a good sword. The woman thought for a short time, and then said that blacksmithing was not suitable for him. He was already too adult for such a business. She also answered the trade proposal. To become a merchant, you need to start with a student, and just so it is impossible to get this work. The taverna owner advised him to join the local adventurers. If Ramades skillfully possesses a sword, he could become a mercenary or adventurer. He apologized for his ignorance and asked to tell in more detail how to start this case. In response, the woman explained that everything is simple enough. It is enough to contact the bank first and then register directly in the guild itself. In addition, everything is quite close, and no documents are required for the design. The procedure lasts very quickly. Without wasting time, he decided to thank the woman for his advice. The taverna's owner was a truly kind person and offered to visit her, because her institution has recently become a favorite holiday destination for members of the guild in the evening. The alien, who accidentally got into this world, found himself in the Guild of Adventurers. He appealed to the administrator to register him as an adventurer and asked what details he should know before this path. The girl immediately realized that she was a newcomer and asked to present a bank card. Raman has already visited the bank and had a card with him. She studied the information carefully and wondered if he was 16. Raman confidently confirmed, "Everything is true, there is no mistake." He explained that he just looks much older than his age and is used to the fact that he is constantly asked. The girl apologized for her confusion. He asked her not to worry and paid attention to the blush on the girl's cheeks. She seems to have already imagined a new pharmacist with her companion for a nice evening meeting. The crazy girl decided to return to her duties and promised to tell about the rules of travel in the guild. As it turned out, this organization is a large-scale community with numerous departments throughout the continent. Each adventure is registered, and for this, the participant receives a certain rank at the appropriate level. It is the level that indicates the strength and skill of the adventurer, and the resulting rank, in its place among others. He replied that he knew. Killing a living creature, you could get some of its strength. The girl said that at the 0 level, at that time, only one person was able to reach the 7th level thanks to their own strength. Rema, slightly hesitant, specified whether she realized that the 7th level is the highest, and why this level is considered so decisive. The administrator explained that newcomers should not worry about this issue. Everything you need will become clear in the process of their own development. Now she tells only general information about the activities of adventurers. The girl began to talk about the types of tasks and explained, if it is a combat mission, for example, it is necessary to destroy certain wild animals, then every disposed of a person can get 3 copper coins. Besides, he wondered if there are tasks that would have to go, for example, beyond the kingdom. The administrator explained that such assignments are called accompanying quests. Fortunately, there is only one way to go to the nearest city, to take new tasks there, and that's what everything has to happen. The girl quickly found the necessary magazine and explained that only 3 places can now be visited: Garvik, Merfolin, and Ode. Archu thought only one thing. He was wanted, so he should leave the empire of the Ultra Empire as soon as possible, and now the perfect opportunity has fallen out. Looking at the map on the wall, the guy realized that the shortest way to the border leads south of the capital. As a result, Ramsh stated that he was ready to take up the task and go to Merfolina, which is located in the east of the continent. The hero, having arrived from another world, decided to buy a weapon. However, to his surprise, there were no Japanese katan. From the affordable choice, the best option was a long sword, but unfortunately, its cost was too big. During her last meeting with the Trek, she wondered if the boy had some weapon. Then he proudly replied that his main weapon was his own hand. The owner noted that such a statement is quite meaningless, because usually adventurers kill not huge and powerful monsters. They can always escape from them. In fact, most often they die from creatures weaker than themselves, because this is what gives rise to careless self-confidence. She explained that you never know what can happen outside the city, so you should always be prepared for any surprises. He realized that the caring woman was quite right. In fact, he was almost nothing in this world. So, contacting the merchant, the guy asked to help him choose the appropriate weapon. The arms trader turned out to be an unlovable person. He immediately stated that there is nothing convenient among his goods, and if something does not suit, then you can go away. However, it was worth saying that he was sent by the owner of the tractor, as the mood of the seller changed instantly. He became friendly. He explained that he had just arrived in the city and recently registered in the local Gildar of Adventurers. The weapon owner asked him to wait a little and warned him no longer to use any strange statements about weapons, such as comfortable or suitable. In a few minutes, the man suggested that you look at a wonderful dagger. Rind was surprised by the perfect work of the weapons and seems to have realized that this dagger was forged according to a special recipe. The guard was surprised that the boys understood the essence correctly. Although this dagger is inexpensive, but thanks to the special technology of production of the blade has become surprisingly strong and is almost not broken. The guard praised the young man for the exceptional ability to evaluate weapons. Such skill is not available to everyone, even experienced. Subsequently, Rema asked him to show him a saber with a curved blade that someone left here. The armor master wondered whether the man has a sword called katana and comes from another world. If so, he confessed that he had no idea how to make such weapons. Cyprus noted that it seems that we would have to use ordinary weapons. He turned to Remus and offered to accompany him to a special room, which stored a whole collection of weapons from another world. Among the exhibits was Tanfa, a unique weapon from Okinawa Island, a 3-section stick that could be assembled into a single design. Also, there was Anchak. In skilled hands, these weapons became truly dangerous. In addition, it was possible to see SAB, a universal weapon, suitable for both attack and protection. The security guard watched the guy carefully, trying to understand how he used a 3-section rod, and asked if he possessed these weapons. Ramar replied that he, among other things, the master's collection also had gabishi, a short weapon designed for an attack that could be used as a metal one. Rema also saw chakra, a metal weapon from ancient India, as well as a folding rod, which could be extremely useful in different situations. He took Tufu in his hands and began to own this rare weapon, which was incredibly impressed by the bunny master. The store owner was in surprise where Remy learned to exercise with such weapons. However, the guy explained that he acted intuitively, trying to understand the principle of Totfa. However, he was not sure whether these weapons would be really effective in real combat. He was also surprised to see Mariki Hosari in the collection, quite unusual weapons that he had already tried to capture, but was not yet sure of his skill. Therefore, he decided to look more closely. After looking at the master of Ramaz's collection several times, the guy opted for the Husar blades and chakram. In addition, he asked the master's sword, because he decided to master the weapons of this world as soon as possible. Rhea returned to the tavern and immediately came across the mistress. The woman did not slow down how she was a meeting with the master armor. In response, the guy proudly showed her a new weapon he had just gained. The woman was glad to see that the guy was now armed and capable of protecting herself. Then the owner of the arrival wondered whether Ramadan received letters with tasks from the guild. He did not understand what it was about, so the woman explained, yes, the guy would definitely receive such a letter from the guild. However, most likely, he just forgot to do it, because he remained a newcomer. An experienced adventurer who was a good drink, assured that there is nothing wrong with this. Every newcomer is wrong. Therefore, the remake will be able to return to the guild tomorrow and get its letter of task tomorrow. Raymap sincerely thanked the man for his support. He thanked for his kindness, and added that Romai was only a newcomer in the guild, so he urged everyone to help him in any business. The noisy dinner with other adventure seekers was left behind. Finally, Romai was in his room and made a relief in a real bed. The guy remembered everything that happened in a day and was proud of himself. Even in a difficult situation, he was not lost and managed to quickly transform into a local guard. Due to his trick, he was able to deceive the pursuers. They just walked by without noticing a stranger. However, after such success, it was dangerous to relax. It is only necessary to lose vigilance, and everything can be destroyed. He mentioned the commander of Rolfa, who, as he was rushed, was a prominent warrior in this world. However, he was also worried about the girl's area, because she organized a search operation and managed the soldiers. So many dangers could also hide there. They were also a boy named Orlando, but she still felt the biggest threat from this girl. Although Orlando saw Saria for only a few minutes, this brief acquaintance was enough to feel an unspeakable fear. If this girl could be compared to a chess figure, she would undoubtedly become Ferzem. The first princess of the empire, Shaldan Isengard, was also a very worrying investigation into the murder of the head magician. She personally took an active part in the search for a mysterious offender. Her subordinates were puzzled, because to find a person whom no one ever saw, and who did not exist, any information seemed almost impossible. Princess Sheldon assured her subordinates that there were no difficulties in fact. Not even knowing what this insidious killer looks like, she will still be able to recognize him. She was outraged by leadership behavior, and demanded that she had not yet grabbed her grandfather's killer. Albana noted that it is too risky to continue searching at night, so they will return to discuss further actions for tomorrow. However, Saria objected to such a decision, and eventually the princess asked Orlando to reassure the girl. Of course, Orlando immediately hurried to execute Sheldon's order, at the same time apologizing to the Saria for it. The girl tried to escape, but Orlando did not leave her a chance to escape. Meanwhile, the Rolf commander asked the princess where they would go the next day. She explained that the next day their detachment would be divided into two groups. The first, under her leadership, will go to the east, and the second will lead Rolf south. She thought about this decision and suggested that the fugitive would probably be served south of the continent. The princess agreed, because the border was really closest there, but it did not leave some strange feeling about the east. Ralph, most experienced of the knights, noted that there are many reasons why the killer could go east, and the princess reminded that she had a wonderful relationship with her talented assistant Sato, who came from the continent of Ryre and copes with her responsibilities. They suggested that the Adelpho garrison staff, but the princess denied. If you take away the warriors, there would be a threat of attack from Zara, and then it would be unreasonable to expect help from the local nobility. Ralph agreed with this and did not insist. Especially, they were so lucky that after the death of the main magician of the empire, the aristocrats did not raise the rebellion. Moreover, in such a situation, they had nothing left but to rely only on their own strength. Meanwhile, Rimai was already far from the capital of the empire, and for the first time in this new world went hunting. The opponents of young Japanese became a flock of fierce wolves, whom she dispersed without difficulty in a matter of moments. After the successful destruction of Rima monsters, he left the capital of the Ultim and found himself in the department of the Guild of Merfol's Adventures. The local Adnanka girl was amazed at the number of creatures with whom the beginner coped on his own. Rima wondered where you can stand the sword, because he was significantly blinking during the battle. The administrator was genuinely surprised that the beginner managed to destroy all the monsters with a sword, and to do it in just one day. At the same time, the girl thought that this guy is a magician who has a powerful destructive magic. Finally, the administrator announced that the reward of Ramiesh is 4 silver and 31 copper coins. I remember lunch then cost 5 copper coins. It was about 43,000 years ago. To get the reward was a real achievement, and Romale was genuinely pleased with his success. The girl from the administration also congratulated the boy on the fact that he rose to the rank of WF. He was surprised that he rose so rapidly. The administrator wondered if the guy was not satisfied with his achievement. In fact, he was extremely happy, just didn't expect to succeed so quickly. Usually, all talented people say that, but this time it was really interesting to hear the news. As it turned out, with the rise in Remy, the whole award, a real gift for a newcomer. Now, there is a rank and a considerable amount of money, but this does not diminish the value of its achievement. The young man was genuinely pleased with the victory, and instantly thought that in this world, he can earn about 100,000 yuan in one day. Suddenly, he remembered the reservation that the owner of the hotel gave him. Never lose vigilance, because excessive self-confidence can cost life even in battle with a weak enemy. Thinking about his safety, Romad decided to find out how much treatment was worth. Explain that gold is needed to buy truly high-quality potions made with magic, and such a first-class elixir can cost about 10 gold coins. He sighed disappointed, hearing such a high price. In the recalculation of Japanese yen, it was a real million amount. He also realized that in this world, any injury can become deadly, but fortunately, now everything is fine. In the same guild, one of the adventurers was indignant. He risked his life, and he never received a well-deserved reward. Administrator, a man named Goras, tried to explain that although he is not a first-class adventurer, however, this robber had nothing to do with the Red Moon Gang, which was discussed in the task. While Goras spent time on the robber, the Red Moon Gang attacked the neighboring village. The worst thing was that during the attack, many young girls were abducted, and several local residents were killed. Goras heard. He even asked whether he realized correctly. If he destroyed the gang of the Red Moon earlier, this tragedy could be avoided. The administrator did not want to respond directly, but acknowledged that now stolen girls would probably be sold. Goras felt guilty, so he suggested that the amount of the fine from his account was written off. Interested in the conversation, Ramiek asked what the girl meant, but she explained that, unfortunately, such troubles here are quite often. He noted that Goras was an experienced mercenary, but this time he forgot about the need for preliminary intelligence, which turned into catastrophic consequences. When performing the task, you should always remember that the consequences of your actions can affect many people. Therefore, It is important for romance to not forget about it and carefully weigh each step. The adventurer, crowned with glory, thought that he had previously been too lightly tasks. In the real world, everything is completely different than in the game, because here for carelessness people pay their own lives. Studying the map of the terrain, Ramai realized, if you move on east, he will soon get the city of Air. At the same time, the guy remembered that robbers should hide in these parts, but still none of them managed to meet. Meanwhile, the robbers attacked a small roll and rejoiced in a generous prey, chests overflowing with gold coins. In addition, they got beautiful young girls as trophies. 2 young beauties, a slave sisters, became a common prey for the insidious robber. The robbers have made a dispute what to do with girls. Some sought to have fun first, and then secretly kill the sisters, so that the leader did not know anything. In addition, the owner of the slaves fled with the guards shamefully, the more laughing of the bandits. For some time I see from afar, accidentally encountered a detachment of bandits. The girls warned the bandits, if they try to touch them, they, together with their sister, immediately end with them, biting themselves. This only caused the bandits. They reminded the girls that they are only a rabbis, and the callers would give them neither escape nor end with them. The oldest of the robbers still decided to have fun with the girls, and ordered others to watch for everything that was happening. Meanwhile, Reen is watching the bandits hard, cautiously sneaking closer. They will have to put up with the fact that they will not be effectively protected by a chain. As soon as the robber made a few steps forward, as a sharp object pierced his neck, leaving a bright purple cut. Due to his lightning speed, Ramak instantly found him next to the girls and firmly decided to stand up for them. They became angry, seeing that a guy dared to intervene in their affairs and also called himself the same Red Moon. The honesty landed on the ground and approached the bandits. They were stunned by his inviolability, which was noticeable on their faces. The bandits decided to get rid of the stranger with insulin, but Romai predicted their intentions and was completely ready for battle. Remy threw his metal plate and immediately grabbed a knife and began to attack the enemy with a ruble. The shootout lasted only a few seconds, and in the end there was only one surviving among the robbers. He cried out of fear. He looked at the frightened guy with contempt and struck him in his face. The sisters looked at their rescuers silently, not knowing how to respond to them. And Rima, meanwhile, asked the slave whether they were fine with them. Although the girls were frightened, Rima still realized that everything was fine with them. Suddenly, one of the slaves, Dave Gorel, noticed that she was on the face of Ramak's face, and hurried to wipe the wound with a handkerchief carefully. He assured that everything was fine with him. The blonde called the Rora and said that her younger sister was next to her. It is worth noting at once that the girls were twins, and the only difference between them was the color of their hair. They bowed low and sincerely thanked Rama for salvation. Roy replied that he had no right to accept thanks from the girlfriend. He explained that he was waiting patiently the right moment, while the robbers would relax, put up weapons, and begin to remove the pants. It was when they lose their vigilance that he made a sudden blow. He honestly acknowledged that he would not seek excuses, but sincerely regrets all the bad things that had to endure the girls. Romana was asked not to blame himself, because everything could end much worse. Rora joined the words of her sister and apologized that they could not thank the Remus for his help. Everyone calmed down and looked closely at the sisters. Their skin had a beautiful dark tint, and the tight figures looked extremely attractive. Their seductive forms could be driven by anyone. The young man felt his face burning. Now it became clear to him why the bandits could not resist such a temptation. He instantly made him thinking about something important. But at the same time, another idea was spinning in his thoughts. The girls' clothes were struck by the costumes of abdominal dancers from Arab fairy tales. In addition, collars with shackles looked quite unnatural. The guy asked the sisters with their name, but Rora sadly replied that there were no names in his sleeves. The guy realized that it was not necessary to ask such a painful question. Then the sisters, in response, asked the name of their rescuer. The guy introduced himself, but asked not to call him a rescuer. It is enough for him to turn right. Emma wondered the girls that they planned to do next and suggested that they take them to the nearest arrow. However, Sarah explained that they could not go without the permission of their master. Riemann was stunned by such a senseless answer and asked if the girls were really serious about everything that happened to them. She remembered how their master, only robbers appeared, immediately fled with her guards, without even thinking about the girls' fate. The sisters did not see anything strange at all, and it was even more puzzling. After all, everything seemed so meaningless that he could not understand what these adult sisters think. He asked if they were going to stand still and wait for their master to return and begin to give the orders again. They replied that they would do it, and the guy could not even believe that all this was really happening. Everything seemed so absurd and meaningless. At the same time, Rambus remembered well that he was chasing Imperial soldiers under the leadership of dangerous people. Therefore, he wanted to send both girls to the city as soon as possible, and finally forget about their existence. He explained that he was getting dark soon, and unknown monsters can wander around. Therefore, all bodies should be removed as soon as possible in order not to attract their attention. He explained that he would just take care of the safety of this area immediately. The girls did not deny and thanked the guy once again for his help. Transferring the bodies of the dead bandits and guards, he reminded himself that it should help these girls only partially. Although such a decision seemed to be indicative hypocrisy, Ramiek fulfilled his mission and believed that the girls are now safe. But suddenly, silence broke a strange sound, which immediately attracted the attention of the guy. It turned out that one of the bandits hid in the bushes, taking advantage of Ramaz was busy. Suddenly, he grabbed his opportunity. He quickly saddled the horse, picked up one of the sisters, and raced it. Simultaneously, as it turned out, the bandits seized Sarah and Ramakursta left for his personal massacre. After all, he was convinced that he had already killed all other robbers. To his surprise, Ramesh saw a precious medical bottle on the ground, worth 1,000,000 yuan. At the same moment, he realized that he had no chance to catch up with the robber who runs away on horseback. He helped Rory to get up and promised to do everything possible to save Sarah. The girl suddenly stated that she could cope on her own, and asked to make a small incision on her face, more precisely, on the little finger of the left hand. Rama did not understand why he needed to cut his finger, and the whole situation seemed absolutely absurd. However, Sarah shouted that there was no time for explanation. Rama has to fulfill her request immediately. The absurdity of the situation was off. However, the Rama still cut his finger, and hesitation, asked if he fulfilled the request correctly. She took her hand strap, whether she was more interested in a small drop of blood, and began to whisper something. Rama immediately mentioned that from the beginning he felt something strange in these two girls. They may not be ordinary slaves at all. Holding the bloody finger of the boy, she turned to the great god Harv and began to make her vow, asking him to listen to her words. He felt a strange excitement and simply watched how this charming girl prayed and spent some rituals with his blood. He wondered if he realized everything right and asked for explanations. When the prayer was completed, Sarah appealed to the deity to accept her victim, blood, and create a blood contract. At the same moment, the girl's body became a mysterious glow. Subsequently, the massive collar and heavy shackles were scattered into many debris, as if they were made of fragile ice or glass. She reported that everything was already prepared, and apologized to the guy for taking advantage of his own forces without his consent. Ramiea was impressed, and did not find words to answer something to such honesty. Sarah began to pray again, but it was more likely to have a speech. And then Roma clearly heard the girl asks, "Run, finally, it's a damn barrier." At that moment, Sarah used the spell of the magic blade. It instantly caught up with the robber. Turning only at the last moment, Brigand swore and regretted that the slaves were witchcraft. To the surprise of Brigand, the young girl used almost the same magic as the insidious old one who had previously called him here. The arrow deviated slightly from the target, but still knocked the horse off his feet. The robber immediately lost his advantage. Later, Sarah asked Remus to turn her sister and take revenge on a robbery. Sarah also begged Remus to immediately go to the aid of her sister, as the robber could harm her. The distance to the dropped rider was at least 1 kilometer, so it is unclear how they could get there so quickly. However, Sarah has already noticed it. He grabbed Remus by his hand and warned that they would run out now. The guy did not even have time to answer how he felt incredible acceleration, as if he had taken his passing bus. In seconds, the frame overcame a long distance and was delighted with such a convenient form of movement. Immediately rushed to her sister, and Ram, barely keeping his balance, hurried after the girl. The exciting moment of reunification of the two sisters ended with warm arms, and Remus sighed with relief because the guy looked around, evaluating the impressive distance in such a short time, and for the first time really felt the benefits of magic of wind. He was asked if the romance had heard of such magic before. The guy immediately realized that he had made a mistake and could accidentally reveal his true origin. The guy was already going to assure that he had never encountered magic, but at the same time noticed that the girl is beginning to suspect something. He also felt confusion, because he could not understand how a person with such outstanding possession of martial arts could know absolutely nothing about the manifestations of magic. The sisters delved into the conversation, remembering everything that happened recently. Rem mentioned the bandit, who at that moment tried to escape again. But his horses were stuck in the mud and entangled in the branches. The warriors only watched the robber and eventually decided that their new ruler Ramash has to decide his fate. It was he who has to deal with that. He was surprised why two pretty girls called him a bishop, but eventually agreed to take responsibility and deal with bandits. He realized that he had only one way out in this situation, and strongly grabbed the sword. The frightened bandit started slowly. At first he tried to buy out, promising to pay any money so that he was only released. But realizing that it did not work, he went to threats. He boasted that his gang has more than 100 people, and they would certainly take revenge on him. And their leader, Saruduo, will never forget or forgive the murder of his associate. He replied that the bandit is incredibly stupid. If he dies in this forest, no one will know who killed him. Raman also added that the bandit still not survived from this situation, so he should put up with the inevitable. He tried to scream that he had a daughter, but a sharp sword broke off this cry mercilessly. After that, Ramiek asked the girls if they really wanted it. In response, the sister only nodded silently, confirming her decision. Sarah acknowledged that they had a hurry with the murder, because important information could still be removed from the bandit. Another man denied, noting that he could hardly possess valuable information. Everything said it could be perceived as a lie, because it was impossible to check his words, and he could easily deceive them. The most important thing was that they managed to return their stolen sister, and now everyone felt safe. He thanked the boy once again and addressed him as a master. Rain, in response, noted that he was not necessarily thanks constantly, and wondered why he called him a master. After all, they are only an hour, so it all looks pretty strange. She explained that they had an oath on the blood, and from now on Ramao became her lord. Such a ritual is quite unusual in their lands. This was confirmed by the guy's assumption, and then Rora asked to spend the same oath ritual with her so that she could consider Ramao as her master. She asked the young man not to give up and help her sister to get rid of the collar and shackles. Ramao was confused, because he did not understand what was happening. He asked to wait a little and give him a rest, and also explained that the sisters did not need to call, serve, or serve him. The sisters immediately upset and cry, deciding that the owner did not love them and did not appreciate them at all. Remad did not expect such a reaction at all and tried. He reminded them that they recently assured themselves they would wait for their master and not leave here. However, now they have changed their minds, work for another and call it their master. It was difficult to understand. They explained that if they manage to conclude a bloody agreement, then they will no longer have to obey the orders of the former owner. However, Rora is still associated with him and cannot leave this place. He asked if they would go to Arrow with him if he fulfilled their request. The girls would probably agree and promise to follow the new owner anywhere. The guy decided to put an end to this senseless story as soon as possible. He then told the girls that after arriving in the city, they would have to tell everything in detail. And now, you have to hurry up and make an appointment. After that, Sarah asked for permission for a short time to return to the forest to pick up her important things with her sister. He tries to see a chunky stranger who stands near the throne Laganda. The unoccupied with fear, he looked around and carefully threw herself in his things. Batman exclaimed that he had finally found Rora and Sarah, and immediately began to ask how much robbers were harmful to them, because he sincerely worried about their condition. This unexpected meeting caused a clear dissatisfaction. The disgusting smooth man, without shy, began to ask the young beauties that the robbers made. The former owner was indignant that he had spent 5 years on the education of 2 light-hearted girls, and now the robbers have ruined them, and they have lost any value for him. Suddenly, she grabbed the sword and sharply ordered the thick not to approach. If he dares to take a step forward, she will shine his huge ass. The slave owner began to insult the girls scornfully, calling them the commoners who decide nothing and have no right to interfere with their true master. Watching all this, he addresses the girls asking, "Is this disgusting brazen? Is the same master they mentioned?" He replied that he was, although the girls always considered him their enemy and hated the most in the world. He realized that the events were not unfolding as he expected, and wanted to ask Remus to stop doing meaningless pranks. The new moon was praised for their good physical shape, and asked if he was trying to play the role of the prince on a white horse for someone. Fat Man boasted that he would be able to profitably sell Remus to true slave connoisseurs. However, these were his last words in life. Magic discs with a whistle faded into his giant head, which was pleasing to the girls. After that, Rora and Sarah grabbed their swords and put them into the ugly body of their former master. Revenge on him during the years of suffering and humiliation. The last chord in the life of the iconic slave owner came when a bloody trickle flooded from his mouth. This was the final conclusion for two beautiful slaves who suffered all stages of suffering. They did not comment on such a cruel massacre, and only insisted as soon as possible to go to the city, where it would be possible to discuss everything safely. Bloody footprints on girls were. Having taken all the necessary things, the striped remit and his two charming companions moved on the road. The young man thought he just wanted to save someone, and now he found himself in an even greater mess. In the city of Era, when it was almost dark, Rema decided to order food for dinner. Meanwhile, two twin sisters took advantage of the services of a local visiting and took a shower to wash away blood and dirt from their magic bodies. The girls joined Roma and asked for a delay. The owner suggested that he dinner together and chat at the table, but, noticing that the girls remained standing, asked why they did not sit down. Sarah immediately explained that the slaves would not have to sit at one table with her master. The embarrassed appearance of Ramabita immediately made the sisters realize that they had to dress first before appearing in front of the owner. In a few minutes, the magic twins returned in a light dress, and Romalfa noted with relief that they put something on themselves. After that, Romalfa again invited the sisters to sit next to her. The sisters refused again, explaining that they would eat later because they were not allowed to sit near the hostess. Raim was stunned by such meaningless rules and reminded them that. He again noticed Sarah's sad look and realized that it was unpleasant to remember her past. Therefore, he explained carefully that he had only a few questions. He specified whether he understands that the sisters always fulfill their master's desire. However, the girl replied that not all of them act so harmoniously. It was he who was their master. So, when he asked them to sit near the table and eat together, they obeyed this order. The girls were incredibly surprised by this order, because it was strictly forbidden. However, the romantic helped them by inviting them to take a place nearby. He explained that when you eat alone, food seems not so delicious. Bramet immediately remembered Sido and his granddaughter, and his heart was full of longing. And for the first time in their lives, Sarah Obed, together with his sister, was invited to sit at a regular table next to the man they considered their owner. Bremet noted how harmoniously sisters fit into the company. He then asked if the girls really consider him their owner after exchange of blood. She confirmed this, and explained that under the conditions of blood oath between them, the owner and subordinates were now established. From now on, both she and Rory have become Resa's fighting rabbis. In addition to slaves of sect and ordinary workers, there is another category: combat slaves. They are specifically used during battles, but in peacetime their strength is deliberately restricted to prevent possible riots against the owner. That is why combat slaves have no right to fight without the direct permission of their owner. If girls are really allowed to voluntarily conclude bloody agreements with the shameful family of the merchant, and also choose a new owner, then why limit their strength to some seals? Rory, without hesitation, asked to keep everything that they would tell about their past now. Romero realized that he just learned something really important, and sincerely promised to fulfill this request. She confessed that her name, as in Roar, was a Malefist, and their family has long served as older knights in the kingdom of Kvift, located on the western coast of the central continent. For Remus, this was a surprise. He suddenly began to be aware of many new details, because the Rabban girls were still new on the other hand. He told him, 5 years ago, during the war with the Kingdom of Shadows, which broke out due to a senseless dispute over trade tariffs, a chancellor occurred. As a result, their homeland, the Kingdom of Quift, ceased to exist, and they had to escape on a ship disguised under a trading vessel. Another betrayal was waiting for them during the journey. This time, they were brought to the guards who eventually sold them into slavery to the merchant of Azo. He was amazed by the horror of everything that happened, and realized what difficult trials had to go through these two young girls. The sisters confessed that they were genuinely trusted to their guards, not even knowing how defenseless a person could be tempting. Sarah suggested that if the girls were not sold, the guards would probably be killed. She also said that their master was the same obese merchant, which they destroyed in the forest. It was he who taught them special combat skills. Once upon a time, as a child, their beloved father died. He taught both to use the blood oath and always repeated that this knowledge was sure to be needed in the future. Rema realized how smart their father was. He predicted even such a course of events. She asked if the father really guessed that they could be slavery, and whether he taught them to get out of any difficulty. The girls confirmed that everything happened exactly as he predicted. She said that they had long been waiting for someone who could be entrusted, and it was Rouse that became the man. Thinking overheard, Remus stated that as a master, he gave girls freedom. In addition, he gave the sisters the money he received from the traitor of Azaz, so now they could start a new, free life. But Sarah refused, stating that Ramen defended not only their own, but also the purity of their ancient kind. Therefore, they sought to thank him for such an act, even if he had to sacrifice his own life. Everything was not so easy. He had his reasons for such an act. They unexpectedly asked Sarah. The owner worried exactly that he was a stranger from another world. They immediately noticed it, because Remap knew nothing about magic or blood. And when a person with such exceptional combat experience has no idea of such things, it looks really strange. He realized that he was really coming from another world, and a man from an empire named Hez was called here. And since then, he had to run constantly. Kali managed to leave the capital of the empire invisibly and make sure that no one knew his face. And this is what became his main advantage. He explained only one thing. He was called by the road. He was convinced that Rory and Sarah would only hurt him to escape, and too, never thought of making slaves. He noted that the pursuers continue to look for him, and may well guess that Rory and Sarah also pose a danger. That is why it would be too risky to stay together. It is better for girls to disperse every way and forget about this meeting. Sarah thought a little, and then replied, "If the owner wants, they will not deny and fulfill his will, although it will leave them a sincere sense of pity." He did not want to see the girls cry and explain to them that their common story has no future. After all, he will still return to his native world. Sarah asked for permission to stay with her sister next to her master and serve him as a sign of gratitude that he saved them. The girls even dreamed of how great if the owner had taken them with him into his other world. They liked this idea that they immediately cheered and asked Ramada to take them with them, because in this world they had no one left. He was stunned by such an offer, and imagined what it would look like if he returned home with two pretty girls. He imagined how angry he would be Asuka if he returns home with two beauties, who would also be represented by his slaves and turn to him accordingly. Of course, Asuka would be disappointed and complain to her grandfather, who did not even imagine that the novel may be such a disgusting person. Ram even dreamed of a dream about his luxurious life in Japan with two seductive slaves. However, he quickly realized that the trip accompanied by the sisters would help him to better hide his escape from the capital and avoid suspicion. In the end, they agreed to go on a journey together and agree that, first of all, we needed to cross the border of the empire. The long road demanded money, so Ramen decided to sell the trophies of the dead merchant and came across a jewelry shop. He apologized for a long waiting and informed Ramen that 3,000 gold coins could be rescued for all these jewelry. Ramen was amazed at the sum and even asked if he heard correctly. The girl did not understand such a reaction at first and asked if he was suited to the offered price. The girl explained that she was definitely ready to apologize, but noted that if the romance decides to sell all the jewelry right away, she is unlikely to do it. She added that she was ready to offer him the right amount, but if such an agreement does not happen, she would have to look for another option. He replied that he was satisfied with everything, and he did not want to spend time searching for another buyer. The girl was glad and promised to pass. She noticed the tricky smile of the merchant, and noted that in this agreement, he could well be deceived. I didn't argue. It would be pointless. In the end, the man took his money and decided to go on. I explained to the girls that before selling all their jewelry, I specially left 2 wedding rings for them, carefully choosing them among everything. Then Sarah reported the disappointing news. The border was blocked. In addition, they learned from the local adventurers guild that Princess Sheldon had arrived in the city. If it were a regular lock, you could simply bribe the guards and leave the empire. But now the situation was much more complicated. She noted that the opposition of the princess was equivalent to the death sentence. Sarah praised her sister and explained that the accusations of betrayal were inevitable. He apologized for drawing girls into such dangerous events. However, Sarah wondered if the master was convinced that the princess really came here for him. Ramosh did not blame himself of everything, but if they really organized such serious persecution, they should be extremely careful. Staying in one place for a long time is not a way out. Looking at the map of the empire, Rama realized that the eastern border was already blocked. So he should move the main road to the city and look for salvation in the northern forests. Although the enemy could guess such a step, especially given that princess soldiers are well focused on the terrain and can place traps, Remar mentioned that the risk is noble, and luck is committed to brave men, so he suggested that his pretty rabbis flee to the north. He decided that he should fight for his life and prove to the persecutors who here is a real hunter and who was a victim in this deadly game. The main assistant garden suggested that the hired killer is likely to go to the eastern border. The only way to freedom ran through the thick forest. Sato proposed to arrange a trap in the forest because it seemed like the smartest solution. However, they still do not know what the offender looks like. Princess Shalvan listens carefully to Sato and says it will not be an obstacle, and most importantly, to hear the words of the killer himself. Then it will be clear that this person is not from our world. The princess, along with Sato, was already in the northern forest. Sheldon assured that he knew the way to find out if the stranger comes from another world. He sat silently by the campfire, waiting for the trap. His anticipation did not let him down. Sato was approached soon and assured that there was no reason for suspicion or fear. He explained that there was no reason to worry. No one left him. Then he apologized for his unexpected appearance and politely asked for permission to join the fire. The stranger looked at Sato and stated that he had not yet allowed to sit next to him. But Sato did not pay attention to the remarks and immediately asked what the guy forgot in such a dangerous place. Carefully pulling his sword, he replied that he heard the eastern border of the city was recently closed. Therefore, he had to look for a detour through this dangerous place. No one knew how tightly the border of the empire was. Staying in the city meant to waste time. Remat also explained to the stranger that he was not at all. At the same time, the Remat advised him not to go to this dangerous forest alone. After all, here is a full flock of wild wolves that will burst around. Satu carefully wondered whether no one is watching Romam. In this case, his desire to be alone is quite clear. But Romai noted in response that Satu himself wanders in the forest alone, behaved suspiciously, and has not yet introduced himself, and did not explain who he was. He apologized for his mistake, and finally introduced himself, explaining that he was here because of important things. He also confessed that he was the deputy captain of the Knights of the Ultim Empire, and therefore has the right to stay in any corner of this territory. Ramatrid restrained his admiration and offered Sato a piece of baked meat. The deputy captain, without ceasing to smile politely, thanked the treat. He explained that only one person in this forest actually pursues. But, unfortunately, the circumstances were so that he does not even know what the offender looks, so he was forced to ask. Ramarsh explained that he should voluntarily go with him to the camp so that they could calmly talk and find out all the circumstances. After a while, Sato hurried to inform the princess that he managed to catch a man in the forest. By the characteristic smell, he realized, this stranger arrived from another world, like all such people. Shaldana praised her beloved assistant and ordered her to be taken to the detainee immediately. After that, he returned to the tent where Ramau was kept, apologizing for the delay. He further explained that his boss wants to meet him. In response, Ramau noted that not against new acquaintances, but to keep the cow, in his opinion, was already too much. The deputy captain wondered if the heavy and inconvenient shackles would be removed, as soon as the circumstances be clear and suspicions will disperse. Sato assured that this would definitely happen, but only after talking to the princess. In a few minutes, Sheldon really entered the tent. She immediately felt that everything that happens around is rotating around this girl, from whom there was an almost noticeable danger. She began with the gratitude of Ramalpha for agreeing to give her time, and expressed her gratitude on behalf of the entire empire, because it is extremely important to find out some events now. He already guessed who was facing him, but still asked if he realized that Princess Shalvan Princess was in front of him. He confirmed her status and name, and then apologized for forced action. Shackles on her hands. Remy replied that he understood everything. To overcome the forest in such a situation, and really looked suspiciously. Sheldon noted that it was not so suspicious, but there are still moments that need to be clarified. Then he asked if Ramayak was really the same man from another world that Imperial soldiers are looking for. He tried to keep calm and replied that he did not understand what it was about. However, the princess advised him not to make a fool, but to openly tell the whole truth, because in such a situation, concealment is nothing. Explained that even when a representative of the royal family turned to Ramiek in an extremely official language, we continued to speak quite of course. And for the inhabitants of this world it is unacceptable. They cannot afford it. It should be understood that royal faces in this world are almost equal to the gods. Ordinary people, having learned that they were a princess, would immediately fall on their knees. Rema understood his mistake, and the princess immediately noticed the surprise on his face, although she appreciated his efforts. Then Shaldana suggested that the boy introduce himself. Hardly Rema said his name, the princess guessed that he came from Japan. It looks like a guy in glasses named Sato, also had more Japanese than it seems at first glance. Vice Capitan acknowledged that it was really so, and that when he was summoned to this world, he was already a Japanese. As required, they stopped empty discussions and explained that Ramaya would now be under the care of Vice Capitan. After that, they will consider how to do it, given all his actions. I did not find the best words and only thanked the princess for her frankness. Shaldana did not hide the surprise. Despite the loss of forces after the ritual of the conscription, Romad not only managed to escape, but also overcame all the obstacles in his path. It became a real shame for the Imperial Guard. If Romand agreed to cooperate, he could unite the lands of this continent. He replied that the idea of serving the interests of the Empire seems to him absurd and unacceptable. Shaldner stressed that he has enormous power and reminded that a creature called from another world is obliged to obey the one who caused it. At that moment, Sato thought that the words of the princess were like a real beacon. So, the deputy captain could not understand why Ramai behaved so calmly, not aware of what difficult situation he was. After all, the scouts could return at any moment, but there were many experienced soldiers without them in the camp. Sato did not leave anxiety. In the end, the vice defaults remained the most vigorous power in the world. The two others were also marked by great power and confidence. Meanwhile, the captain asked the princess to listen to him. He remembered the order of His Majesty. A person should be captured alive, but a stranger from another world should be destroyed without delay. The princess was angry with such boldness and was indignantly asked, where in Sato the courage to neglect the orders of Her Majesty, to disarm her, and even without permission to grab a sword right in front of her. He promised to accept any punishment, but only after destroying this dangerous man. The only warrior who survived was able to tell me that they attacked a terrible monster, as if caused from another world. Ralph continued to believe in the same way. In his opinion, the stranger from the other world was to be weakened. Therefore, he decided not to waste time and personally investigate the case and find a stranger as soon as possible. The captain, threatening Ramasses with a sword, stated that he would allow him to say the last words only because they are both Japanese. But Remas replied that even in the face of death he did not consider it necessary to talk to strangers. It surprised Sato. He realized that Remas did not lack the courage. He noted that this is not quite true, because among all those present he, Sato and Princess, those who will have to die very soon. Before Rora has applied her magical attack, the deputy captain feels dangerous and has time to repel the prince. Riding out of the wreckage, Sato apologized to the princess and asked if everything was fine with her. Sheldon replied that she was not injured and wondered what had happened. Sato was not sure himself, but suggested that they were probably attacked by the magic of the wind blade. Remus thanked his faithful maid for appearing at the most necessary moment. In response, the girl happily noted that she was happy to see the owner alive and unharmed. Ramad was stunned to see a young sorceress helps a man from another world. He was amazed at her skill. He praised his root. Thanks to her spell, he did not even touch the fragment of the destroyed wall. She replied that she wanted to please her master and do everything possible. Sago was stunned that the stranger from the other world has not only an accomplice, but also a submissive servant. Sago wondered where Sarah went, but soon it turned out. The second sister was lightning with the rest of the guards and now appeared in a dilapidated tent. She explained that she had dealt with the soldiers without any effort, because these meaningless guards did not even expect a magical attack and did not resist. It was at this moment that they realized that they were attacked by combat slaves who have a powerful attacking magic. This was surprising, because in this fantastic world, only a few are able to skillfully own magic. If such people agree to serve the Empire, then at least they are guaranteed to provide the title of the Knight. It all depends on the abilities of a person. But even an ordinary magician is able to match the force with the whole army of experienced soldiers. Sheldon, trying to get up from the earth, addressed the girls in surprise. Who they are and how to attack Imperial soldiers. He never answered these questions. Of course everyone knew. The slave always undoubtedly obey their owner's orders. However, these girls were striking with their confidence and strength. I could not understand why such strong sorceresses would obey the ordinary guy from another world. Moreover, it appeared here only a few days ago. The princess whispered quietly, Vice Capitan that they need to find a way to escape. But Romalf, of course, understood everything perfectly, and smiling asked, "Will they really believe that they can escape from this world?" She explained to her mentor that he now had a great opportunity to declare herself. After all, if he manages to kill one of the members of the royal family, he once again considered his decision and doubted whether he would be able to cope with two strong rivals, even if he was taught full. He was most concerned about the same question: Princess Sheldon, who could have extraordinary combat skills. Then he ordered his slaves to stop here. Although at first intended to destroy them all, the rivals seemed extremely experienced. Even though less, chances can lead to unexpected consequences. He explained that one of the sisters could not be stronger than another. Both may die in this battle. He asked the girls if they were really ready to sacrifice their lives for the sake of it. But even if so, it is worth remembering. A garden is an ordinary guy who just wants to protect the royal family. Remark sincerely confessed that he did not want Rora or Sarah. They were stunned by the owner's words. He equated their lives to the life of the princess and did not want to risk them. Sheldon respected Romaz's decision. He asked to wait a little and said he wanted to stay to ask an important question, and he explained that he is actually a common student of the average school. Sato, of course, did not believe this answer, and asked him to tell him everything in more detail. Sato also did not believe these words, and asked how Rimac could have been so easy to kill people if he was new as a peaceful man in modern Japan. Does Sato think that in such a situation you just need to stand and patiently strike? After all, it is quite natural for any ordinary person to answer. Rimac assured that he would never have started a fight first, but he would not be restrained if he was attacked. I remember his mentors Sido and Rupin. They repeatedly repeated, he participates in a fight only when he is really set to destroy his opponent. However, the guy immediately noted that now it is not time to talk about outlook. He ordered the girls to leave this camp immediately among the ruins. One of the soldiers shouted after you could run anywhere. But one day the Empire would unite the entire central continent, and then there would be no place where it will be possible to hide from retribution. Ramar only quit that. In such circumstances, he should return to his native planet as soon as possible. A few days later, having crossed the border of the Empire, Ray, along with his faithful rabbis, found himself in the midst of an immense desert. Sarah advised to go to the trading rows near the oasis. It is here that it is always crowded. You can buy everything you need and find out how to return to other worlds. Suddenly, the earth under his feet trembled, and for a moment a giant monster escaped from the sand. With her appearance, she reminded the Ramai creature from a fantastic novel that he read once. Remuta surprised the appearance of a giant sandworm, although, as it turned out, such creatures are a common occurrence in these deserteds. Suddenly, he noticed that the monster had returned to his back. It was a wonderful chance for the attack. The girls watched the dangerous situation scared. He thought it could be a trap. Thus a sandy worm can evade him, and then unexpectedly attack from the rear. I explained to girls that we would try to fight this enemy. The sisters inside me immediately warned their ruler. The sight of the sandworm is so sharp that it is almost impossible to sneak up to him. However, Ramiek reassured them. They say, his plan does not depend on the ability of the worm to see. Everything they need to distract the monster and knock him down from the Pantalik. He also noted that in reality it was almost no danger. The main thing is to remain careful. So they should try to achieve. In a few minutes, everything was over. A huge sandy worm, mortally wounded, lay motionless, though he was still breathing. The girls suggested Remus to strike him the last blow, but the guy refused, explaining that he had no interest in it, so they could complete the case. They were reminded that Remac's main advantage is the ability to absorb all this unnecessary. His strength is in absorption. Raman has heard it more than once, but still decided to clarify. It seemed to me that many local rules were extremely reminiscent of playing. It is so convenient to allow someone to harm until the monster has a minimum of lives, and then to get it yourself. Despite all the charm of this fantasy world, Reima constantly thought about his home and very much dreamed of returning to Tokyo. Soon the travelers reached the Oasis of Mirrors, a city located in the heart of the kingdom of Helniskilt. Arriving in the city, they stopped at the famous sorceress of Anna Maria. It was she who told the traveler that returning to his native world was impossible. He was stunned by such a response, and explained that he spent 2 months in a heavy journey through the desert to reach this city. After all, he was assured that it was Anna Maria who knows exactly how to return home. Contras explained that in this world there are 3 varieties of magic. Magic of martial arts, magic of words, and given magic. So, in fact, all magic here is limited only by these 3 directions. The magic of martial arts is aimed at strengthening your own abilities and does not require the pronunciation. It acts solely on the one who uses it. To spell, it is necessary to study the spell in advance and devote their power to the gods, demons, or spirits to cause supernatural phenomena. The magic of 3 is the art of giving that allows you to impose a special seal on weapons, giving it the ability to absorb the magical energy of its owner. Magic is based on the power of the word. To carry out the ritual of the call, the sorcerer must sacrifice his magical energy of the deity. In fact, it is not so difficult to call someone from another world, because sorcerers always know what a creature will take their magical power. But in order to bring a person back to his native world, magical energy must be sacrificed to God from that world. If a person does not receive permission from the god of his world, he will not be able to return home. This is the main difficulty for magicians. He thought about the information he received and asked whether he realized correctly everything he was needed to find out the name of God from his world. Animaria confirmed that this is the key to such a ritual. He sincerely rejoiced in this news. After all, if everything is true, he has a great opportunity to see the beautiful modernist. He explained the sorceress that he knew the names of many gods from his world, and if it is not enough, he will be able to gather additional information from other people who, as well as him, were called up to this place. It was assumed that there may be some records in this world. If you find them, then they could. For Ceres Animarius demonstrated a huge book that stored records of Ramyak-like people. They all sought to return to their home planet. She had no idea who at all spread rumors about her extraordinary abilities. Most likely, this person knows that the book is in her, and that is why she gave her this advice. Rora and Sarah wondered what it means that the witch has already tested all possible ways to communicate with gods from other worlds. Arya explained that this book has been edited for several hundred years, so everyone should be aware of how difficult it was. This answer upset him. The witch explained, this is the true essence of this world. This time, Rommel is incredibly lucky, because it seems that only he has power over his own life. During this meeting, the sister noted that the mentor remained calm. He did not lose balance either when he saved them, or during a clash with the princess. She still reminded her sister that their mentor was a really good person. But Rory was a different opinion. Ramal was currently engulfed in a fierce anger. In such a state he could destroy anyone. Ramal was burning not only from despair because of his inability to return home, he was also a little different, which did not give him rest. He tried to convey to Rora that she would also be indignant if one of them had made a slave and allowed the other to choose a couple. She noted that in this case, everyone sought to return their favorite system in their own way. Sira explained, about the same feelings felt remains, although for girls it was, of course many people have no skills to protect themselves. After all, completely different people were called from the other world. Rema remembers all the people who have been forcibly turned into slaves, and whom they all were despised. His hatred of this world, in which he found himself contrary to his own will, is only growing. All the rage accumulated in Raven was about to come out against this world. The servants were quite worried about the state of their master. For 2 days Ramio did not leave his room and did not let anyone. Meanwhile, the young man's consciousness wandered in a spooky place. The unfamiliar voice insisted that he wake up Rage. The voice argued that he best realized what was happening to Roman Ale. He asked what Romod wanted the most at this moment. The guy confessed that above all he wanted to return home, where Master Saito and his charming grandson Asuka were waiting for him. This mysterious creature replied that such an opportunity really exists. This will require a proper sacrifice and unwavering determination, as well as awareness of everything that is happening. Ramen has to understand what is waiting for him, and to find out who is actually guilty of all the troubles. The mysterious voice replied that this is not true at all. It is not in it, but in the world that is distorted, unrecognizable. All the fault lies on the one who created this perverted world, and throws you on the altar of sacrifice again and again. Ramam must be returned what it belongs to him. To do this, it should destroy the defillery and allow your body to be used. The mammoth has incredible power and can be quietly erased from the face of the earth. At that moment, 2 young sisters tried to bring their expensive mentor. They explained that they had heard his cries, so they were forced to break into the room immediately to help him. Gradually coming to consciousness, he finally realized that cheerful girls in arms were squeezing him so firmly that he is almost The girl suggested going to the dining room and banging a little. Ma has not eaten a crumb since it closed in this room. He agreed with her proposal, and they left the room together. He was surprised to see the destroyed front door, massive and durable structures. The girls explained that when they heard the cries, they were forced to knock them out. They noted that it was absolutely not necessary. It was possible to just contact the owner and ask for a spare key. He quickly found the owner of the arrival, who immediately invited to try even hot as soon as the stew. Agreeing to taste the appetizing dish, Ramsh was surprised to see a large portion, and explained that he could not eat so much. However, the owner of the arrival only waved, saying, Ramsh finally stopped joke, because he prepared the dish, taking into account the two girls who were with him. Mr. explained that the two maids have also remained hungry since the romance closed in his room for unknown reasons. He hotly urged not to be indifferent and to feed the girls immediately. Such news stunned Remus. He had no idea that the maid gave up food. Remus thanked the caring owner, but the woman replied that she only leads her business that brings her profit. True gratitude, she said, should be expressed by other people. He did not argue with the harsh hostess and thanked her for delicious food again. However, the woman reminded that the remastery was still to blame for the broken door. Within a few minutes, the guy was in his room and invited two young beauties to dine with him. Sarah and Rora were waiting with great look forward to this moment. Suddenly, Sarah asked Raman to calm down and struggle her anger, because otherwise it could have turned into horrible consequences. He apologized to the girls for making them worry about themselves. The sisters replied that there was nothing wrong with that. But Roberts realized, for them this world is a home, and they are always, no matter how much the owner hates you or how he created this world in all circumstances, they will always remain his allies. Such devotion incredibly pleased him, and he jokingly called the girls real stupid. The sisters did not understand the joke and decided that in their own words they were too angry with the owner, and now everything would get worse. However, in a moment their anxieties were dispelled because, at that moment, everyone realized, even if the master wept, there would be nothing wrong with that. After all, this young man tries to behave adults, though he is still a child. The young man, trying to hide his childhood embarrassment, suggested focusing on dinner and just eating stew while, in the morning, the sisters left the abandoned city and moved on the central part of the continent. On the way, they managed to defeat a giant mantis. Its parts of the body are always appreciated by merchants in any city. She wondered her master why he did not use the full money as a merchant of the ACSU, and further wanders with dangerous territories. Because of this, she did not even immediately mention the fat man who was the previous owner of the girl. The guy explained that in this world he had neither family nor home wherever he could return. In addition, he lacks true friends. Therefore, he decided to continue to travel, looking for adventures so that at least to fill his life with content. Not long thinking, Rawa still decided to explain in more detail. Of course, journeys could not be the true meaning of life. Like a warrior, he goes on the road to. He confessed that the knowledge gained from his grandfather gained during difficult trials came in handy. Now he truly felt a new power. He even clenched his fist in order to see this incomprehensible force on his own experience. Explain to your master that he is wrong when he claims that he is completely lonely in this world, without friends and relatives. After all, there are always two devoted maids who are ready to support and come to the rescue at any time. He apologized and confessed that he really felt lonely, but now he is much easier for him, and for that he is sincerely grateful to the girls for their care and kindness. Travelers found themselves at the entrance to the picturesque port city, where the screams of the seagulls were heard. The roar of the waves came and a fresh, salty sea breeze was felt. He looked around with surprise, because he got to an unfamiliar city, where many residents seemed rather strange to him. Nevertheless, the atmosphere around remained calm and peaceful. Local branch of the Fulsar Adventure Guild. Travelers met Master Wall's High Nickel. This friendly young man, he did not delight this news. However, he had a bad anticipation when the guild administrator asked him to go to the guilder's office for an important conversation. He wondered why he was entrusted with this case, because for him it was an atypical task, and besides he had no extensive experience. However, Master Walls explained that there are currently lacking employees, and in addition, the rules of the guild do not prohibit even newcomers to be involved in mandatory tasks. Walls also apologized for an unexpected mission, emphasizing that a truly valuable customer had addressed the guild. It turned out that this time the mission was accompanied by a group of merchants from this city to the city of the Kingdom of Rhodes, Syria. Sarah asked Guildmist, What would happen if they gave up this task? He smiled motionlessly and explained that if they refuse, their licenses and membership in the guild would be temporarily lost. And after considering the refusal, they can be deprived at all the right to participate in the guild. The head of the guild explained that regardless of the circumstances, the reward for this task would be extremely generous. In addition, to strengthen the team, several of the best mercenaries will go with them, and the guild will provide participants with the best equipment. Ramao had to agree to this strange mission. He was amazed when he saw a huge crew decorated with jewelry of gold, and even thought, that is exactly what is the best equipment that the guildmaster mentioned? A few minutes later, a girl approached him and noted that this task seems quite strange to her. After all, she has already checked everything. She introduced herself to Lion, the commander of the Pink Lion team. Remag congratulated the girl and noted that Lion was surprisingly beautiful. After that, Lion presented a chunky man named Balls and Clown, noting that Balls was her right hand. It was at this moment that a stranger approached the group and addressed the adventurers. He expressed dissatisfaction with his accompaniment. How can 2 girls and a boy with a single sword guarantee him safety? He was surprised by such boldness and asked who this smooth man was. Sarah suggested that it is probably the one they should find. Then the merchant suddenly realized that these 2 twin girls were fighting slaves. I became interested in the sisters, suddenly realizing their true price. He suggested that the girls believe him, because he could help find the best owner for them. And in fact, with such beauty, they would have been more in a luxurious bed, rather than choosing life in a dusty arena. He decided to intervene in the situation and suggested a pathetic merchant to look at his secret, otherworldly combat equipment to finally strengthen his position in the tractor. Masara was advised to relax and not worry about their mission. However, being a merchant in this world is not easy and full of challenges. When Raman felt decisive to touch the Messiah on his shoulders, he even seemed to decide to do him a massage. Then we went to the merchant to allow the master of martial arts to approach him from behind. Nasara already guessed about the true meaning of these words, but it was Ramiek who explained that the most dangerous. The attendees and continued to encourage Ramgech, calling him an exemplary man. However, the guy, without stopping, noted that it was surprisingly easy to guess the intentions of the merchant. Masara did not have time to get rid of, as the strong hands of the boys tightened his neck. Ramas remained calm and focused. He asked in a quiet voice whether Masar was hiding something from his surroundings and whether he was lying to them. After that seemingly pleasant conversation with the merchant, Raman told his group that this merchant was a mean liar. He suggested that the current task was nothing more than a clever trap. He wondered if he really learned of Rama when he grabbed the merchant by his neck. However, he just waved. They say, a lie and so long was revealed, and he grabbed the abomination simply because he was a native. Liana regretted with regret that unfortunately, they still know neither the purpose of this trap or its details. Restrained and indifferent, I advised Liana to think about giving up this mission. However, the girl denied. This is impossible, because they now have only suspicions, and by stopping the task, they will destroy the reputation of their team. They explained that if the reputation of the guild had suffered, all responsibility would lie on their shoulders. In this case, they run the risk of losing their licenses, and maybe forever. First, it may seem that mercenaries and adventurers are truly free people. Yes, it looks only thanks to the support of the guild. Without her leadership, it would be extremely difficult for them to find a decent job, and even to cross the border of the kingdom is almost impossible because they cannot afford to lose their dog. He confessed that he had no idea why Masar merchant deceived him, but I am sure that this man is much more influential. The merchant himself probably plays only the role of the spy. Tell him that there is a high probability that this trap is arranged for him. This bright, lush carriage could only appear here thanks to the influence of aristocrats, and therefore, they are also involved in the case. She offered to call a few more people from her main detachment, but Rima refused. Otherwise, it would look as if they had already arisen, which was his personal business. He noted that he did not want outsiders to die through him. These words only cheered up an experienced adventure search. Liana said with a smile that Romao is either a too decent guy, or he's still a fool who did not blow in his mustache. She directly stated that both herself and her people are likely to be hired by killers who could harm the frame. Nevertheless, Rama talks openly and trustingly with possible murderers, although they are only familiar with a few hours. Assessing Lion's mental capacity, Rama jokingly noted that if it is true, then he probably would have to seem to die immediately. His words caused a common laughter, But Lion himself just waved his hand, asking not to worry about it. He confessed that he could not manage the cart, and asked the Rora to resolve this issue. The sisters again stressed that they were always ready to fulfill their owner orders, so Ramen may not even take into account their thoughts. After that, Ramen addressed Bolts to the question of whether he possesses that magic, because then he would find a responsible task. The conversation was rolled by the campfire. In the end, everyone dispersed the tents, and Bolts wandered the camp for a long time, looking into the night sky. She was side by side and suggested that the trap could be aimed at her because she was a mercenary captain. Perhaps all this story does not concern romance at all. They suggested that they conclude a small agreement and promised each other no jealousy if one of them dies by the hand of the insidious killer. He did not have time and be surprised by her proposals, as he felt the girl hugging him firmly in the next moment and attracted him. Liana suggested being closer to each other. Maybe then the task will seem more interesting. But suddenly 2 angry sisters appeared, covered with frantic jealousy. They pushed the creeper without hesitation from their master. Explained to the sisters that they have nothing to worry about. An innocent kiss is quite familiar. But the sisters decided that Liana wanted to harm their master, and when he heard about the kiss, they only suffered that they calmed down. She decided to take advantage of the situation in her favor, and invited Ramit to spend time together in a luxurious carriage, hinting at a fun leisure, especially because she had wonderful wine. Ran was stunned by such a girl's frankness. Sarah and Ran were outraged together that forcing a minor to drink alcohol and try to seduce it is a true crime. He suddenly realized that he was losing a wonderful opportunity to spend time with Lion, and hurried to assure that he was always ready to go for a strategic meeting with the ally, and not mind drinking a little. However, the angry rabbis sharply sected his master and advised him to be silent better. The caravan of traitors went on the road, not suspecting that they are watching closely and waiting patiently until they leave the royal forest. The guardian commander ordered the fire to be opened on the caravan, forcing him to split to make it easier to capture prisoners. He also encourages his subordinates, explaining that it is not necessary to kill anyone. The main thing is not to let the witch cross the forest border. Minutes later, a powerful hail of arrows collapsed. The crazy drainage shells sowed panic. The merchants in despair rushed to evade fatal wounds and decided to speed up the course as soon as possible. Seeing that the caravan was rapidly approaching the riders of the riders, an order was given. Merchants have to go forward, and the rest will remain to restrain the pursuers. They decided to remove a heavy visa and warned the girls firmly so as not to fall during a sharp jerk. In a few minutes, a heavy cart was removed from the horses, and at the first inequality, he spilled over with a scream. It was then that Mok realized that it was a good time to take advantage of the situation and try to increase the separation from the pursuers. Laura pointed forward and warned that the merchants who were ahead were already sending their swords on them. The situation became increasingly dangerous, and Romail was looking for a way to break out of the trap. It was obvious that the 2 detachments were moving towards each other, gradually closing the ring. I was expecting such events, but in a few minutes everything has changed dramatically. Fear suddenly gave way to surprise. Suddenly, it turned out that the buyers who pursued the detachment suddenly began to assault with each other, completely forgetting both the mercenaries and the adventurers. And his slave was not at all understood what was happening, and why these 2 groups suddenly joined each other, as if it were planned in advance. Last night, at the hearth, Ramen reflected a possible attack and concluded that in such a situation, they would have an advantage. Their main advantage was the almost absolute belief in the reliability of the prepared trap. The question was how to take advantage of this advantage, because they had no idea what would happen, or when it would happen. He tried to explain. If they guessed the ambush, it is logical that the party that attacks the first would consider himself the master of the position. In this case, it is only important to determine the place of the future attack. It will immediately give them an advantage and allow them to be 1 step ahead. He explained that now they are only a detachment of mercenaries who accompany traitors, so no one perceives them seriously. There is no official search in the kingdom, and no matter who will be the victim of the attack, according to this principle, they cannot harm the Masari, which persistently states that she is a merchant. Therefore, the attackers are likely to choose the most remote and deserted place on the route. You should not expect a large army. Rather, it will be a small and mobile detachment. The most effective way to lure the enemy into a trap with a small detachment is definitely an ambush. So the attackers will be able to fully take advantage of the preferences of the area. Some people questioned such assumptions and were interested in, What about these probable attackers will choose a completely different place to attack? But Rast still remained convinced that it would be a small group that will have to use relief in its favor. The one who participates in this attack is undoubtedly to choose the best strategy for their actions. Otherwise, in the eyes of others, it will look mediocrity. He was amazed at the incredible imagination of the young adventure seeker, and Lion was so immersed in reflection that she finally stopped following all the fictional variants of events. One of the remales suggested watching the map and noticing that the valley was located near the border of the Kingdom of Rhodes. He noted that the end of the valley near the high mountain could be the perfect ambush, asked what they would do if the attack happens at night. However, Ray explained that this option is unlikely because, to sound his name in the dark, trying to see something ahead. At that time, I didn't even know how Sato carefully thinks about this attack, looking for the best solution nervously. The caravan went on the road. Rema proposed to discuss all the details again and warned that the attack would be in the valley near the border. It is especially dangerous if the enemies are magicians, because it will be extremely difficult to hold back their attack. It was also assumed that the attackers would certainly use the height to throw them with stones or fired with arrows. In such a situation, I would have to move much faster. You should also be careful with the merchants after the attack. It is important to allow them to leave quickly when the attack occurs. If they subsequently combine with reinforcement, it can be in danger. He recalled that in such a situation they can be surrounded. However, Romai assured that such tactics are appropriate when the opponent is equal to you. Therefore, they need to be stronger than merchants, and if necessary, break through their system. Even if they get into the tick, they will still have a chance to break through the merchant. Even before the battle began, Rema was convinced of his plan, but now he realized that he was mistaken. The merchants were not enemies, but on the contrary, fought against the attackers. It was not easy to understand how to proceed in this situation. Lion reported that everything was fine with her detachment. However, unfortunately, several mercenaries have already died. Liana also reminded that they will now have to protect merchants at any cost if their plan is false. He noted that in this case, they should return to the original plan, to fulfill their mission and ask the Liana gathering all the mercenaries who were scattered. Uniting the forces, the Ramans ordered the attack of the radar and sent a detachment of riders on the offensive. The commander of the leaders did not expect such actions from ruthless opponents and was stunned, learning that the carriage is empty and the witch should have become. He was celebrated for brilliant actions because now the raiders are in a difficult position. However, he confessed that he still doubts whether everything happens as it should. It is only necessary to rely on a young slave and hope for its ability. I immediately remembered yesterday's conversation with Sarah. She was too excited and even a little lost. She apologized for the time lost and promised to start preparation immediately for tomorrow. However, Ramiek explained that he just wanted to report something very important. She burst into tears and asked excitedly whether the teacher was disappointed in her and whether he wanted to send her away. But Ramiek immediately reassured her, assured that he didn't even think about it. Sarah cried even more, deciding that Ramiek was in fact despising the slaves. After all, the owner prefers more slender and beautiful girls, and her strong muscles only cause disgust. But Ramiek immediately denied, they say, he did not want to discuss the appearance at all. But if it was already discussed, Sarah is a very beautiful girl. The girl finally calmed down, and Remy explained that she wanted to discuss a probable attack that could happen tomorrow. In addition, Sarah still has to play his final role in the whole performance. He explained that as soon as they would turn around and lure the enemies into the trap, being in the magical circle, he would give the Sari a sign for the offensive. Its task is to strike enemies with its magical power. The girl happily accepted this responsibility, and even blushed with excitement. She sincerely promised to fulfill the orders of her master as best and completely destroy all the bandages. She explained that the main difficulty was that the enemies would move on human horses, so it would be quite difficult to use spells against such quick goals. He explained that that is why Boltz asked to join this attack. He was an experienced mercenary and perfectly complemented Sarah's ability. To give her confidence, Rima explained to the girl that the success of the operation depends on her. Her role is even more important than Boltz. Only she could release the girl from the car correctly, and Boltz would only help her with it. They sincerely believed that only Sarah was able to change the situation in their favor. It was only necessary to wait for her decisive action. Meanwhile, the raider commander tried to organize a press conference. Merchanka Masara, induced by an unexpected attack, decided to take revenge in the Vyakan dress. In just a few minutes, everything could be lost. Along with the attack, the merchants would also be killed, which would mean a complete failure of the task and the loss of licenses. The situation annoyed the remade to the nonsense, because he had no idea that everything would be so complicated. He has already exhausted all the possibilities, even used that damned figure carriage. He had a few times the idea of just leaving the valley and trusting the case, but in the end he decided to act to the end and to deal with enemies that were coming. Ask Laura how much she liked the disgusting fat merchant Masar who sought to resell her. She immediately remembered the lustful look of the merchant, and she swept her rage. Laura screamed with anger that she hates this scum. Then she asked Lion to be a mediator. At the same time, the mercenary detachment commander mentioned a reflected peak of the vulgar merchant. Having rejoiced in the girl's good mood, he ordered everyone to rush forward and win a victory. At the same moment, Rima gave the Sari a conventional sign to start spelling. Sarah said the stone bamboo spell, and in a moment, a huge stone piles grew out of the ground, which were completely caught by the riders by surprise. Sari's magical attack ended. The consequences of its devastating force were obvious. Now it was only necessary to check whether someone survived, and then personally find a merchant Masaru. In a few minutes, the message was received. In fact, there were those who survived and had already been calculated. Remap praised the mercenary for promptness and ordered to gather all the surviving in one place. He was amazed at how an experienced mercenary combines magical attacks with brilliant battle skills. However, Boltz replied that the real merit belongs to the young Sarah. He just witnessed skillfully woven magic and grateful for such valuable experience. Masara did not joke, and threatened the most severe punishment for mercenaries and adventurers who were so unceremoniously treating their client. I explained that the merchants had just grabbed the swords and entered the battle with the enemy. They were no longer clients. Therefore, mercenaries were no longer obliged to protect them. It turned out that Masara people were not at all traitors. All this story was only deceased from the beginning. Frightened, Masara asked why Ramab grabbed his sword. He then suggested that he finally calm the false merchant and simply inform everyone that he was killed during the attack. Masara was in response to mutilated that he was not guilty of anything, and stressed, "True enemies are those who attack the caravan, so they need to be destroyed." He stated that these damn knights were constantly climbing here. Heroes who kill hundreds of people without any regret. In fact, they are only pointless. Masaru was asked to answer who he really is. In response, he confessed that only a slave, traded, who has long been trying to end his past thief. Then he began to be pleased with the mercy, promising that in the case of mercy, he was ready to sell any slave for nothing. At the Ram Negotiation Council, he demanded that it happen immediately. But Masara only neglected the boy with a naive beginner who got into business, which he could not understand. Masara knew a lot, so it was necessary to learn more from him. Sarah immediately announced to help if you need to apply rigid methods. Masara realized what hopeless he got into, and sincerely asked for death and deception. Ramaya remained satisfied with the result, and explained to the merchant that since he was, that's the last moment for Masar. His spooky cry came overnight. The associated commander, stunned by what was happening, could not understand how all this happened to his detachment. Ander was convinced of his victory, because his detachment overcame a long way in the chase of a witch. He understood that in the future, it could be a great threat to all humanity. Come to the captain of the Royal Knights of Michael Donish, and explain that they now need to hold a number. The next day, having received all the necessary information from the merchant, we were ready to act. The officer Michael was stunned by the words of a strange young man, because he could not understand where this guy knows about the heirs of his kingdom. To make sure that the girl standing next to him was indeed the next heir to the throne of Rhodes. The girl had already had her name, but the Night Guard commander insisted that she voiced her name. At this point, Michael explained that no one has the right to demand for someone. Michael realized that he had not thought of it at all. After all, the sisters cannot use their real name, Malfist Animal. He reported that the name of this girl was Mikashiba, and the full name was Sarah Mikashiba. Ramas also stressed that she is her brother and is ready to answer her words. Michael asked if Remus was really a girl's brother. He smiled and joked that at least she was not her father. In the end, Michael acknowledged the defeat in this fight, and asked cold-blooded to end it without delay. In response, he stated that he had no reason to kill Michael Commander. The brave knight wondered why delay what is so inevitable, but Lion advised Michael not to hurry and reminded that he was the first that he started the attack with his Watagoy. At the same time, he explained to the knight that he was in no way an enemy of the Kingdom of Road. It was suspected whether the nobles were sent. When asked why she was involved in this battle, Rima replied that this was the essence of the whole problem. He suggested asking this issue to the commander-in-chief of the knights, promising to tell Michael later everything he wants to hear. However, the man reassured him, explaining that it is not necessary to worry. It is only his way to test the sincerity of the interlocutor. Ask Michael to stay in place and explain that you are not here to harm him. After that, the guy shouted, and the girl immediately found himself next to him. A girl named Montgomery stated that she would now ask her question. Michael was surprised to realize the truth. A twin girl stood in front of him, and he realized that there was no point in resisting. Rora wondered if all these people were really the Kingdom of the Road. The girl wondered why Michael in general organized an attack on a trading caravan, and whether it was somehow related to the struggle for the throne. After that, Rora turned to, she asked if she realized, the kingdom's knights were fighting against the nobility that stood to the queen's side. After all, it seems that after the unexpected death of the king, the first in the queue on the throne was to become a princess. There were also doubts whether the noble families used the will of the king as an excuse to support the second princess. Michael inadvertently mentioned his excitement and realized that it would be extremely difficult for him to answer all the questions. Listening to her questioning, Rora said, "Did she understand right? Did the second princess Michael really want to kill?" From these words, the knight finally lost his self-control. His excitement increased even more, and he could no longer hide his emotions. The man, without the words of Michael, understood everything, and noted that now the most important thing, how the events will continue to unfold. Liana has suggested that they were simply used as a bait, and Guildmaster Voles, who always seemed like an honest person, actually leads a double game. It was proposed to talk about this situation in public and complain to other guild branches. Liana praised her partner for the right idea, but stressed that without convincing evidence, they have almost no chance of success. She warned that if he continues to be exposed to such risks, he could be exposed. Even if they managed to bring the guilders' involvement in all these ominous intrigues, there would still be no chance of winning, because too big money and influential people are involved in this case. It is about confrontation between the authorities and the influence of the guilder from the extremely influential trade guild. They simply had no strength or convincing arguments to oppose such power. He learned what merces think about Masaru's lying merchant. After all, it happened many years ago. After all the events experienced, apparently, the insidious man will never open his mouth again. He promised to deal with this with the help of a majestic rod, which would make Masaru look into the world and remember the bitter moments from his past forever. Explain what pain is painful, as Masaru is a futile business. However, this sophisticated way of torture is particularly cruel. When the stick penetrates the most sensitive places, even the most stable can speak very quickly. Michael considered everything heard and exclaimed that he could not accept such words. For him, the real RS was the first princess, and Sarah was only a escaping, jumped by a treacherous aristocrat. The Knight's commander, angry at the edge, said that the only legitimate heir to the throne is its Majesty, Lady Lupy. As expected, Alan immediately supported Michael. Such unexpected consent really stunned all those present that night. He explained that Sarah is actually the extramarital daughter of the previous king, and has no right to be called a princess. Currently, she is only a companion, though it comes from a noble family. Rora immediately intervened in the conversation and confirmed the words of her master. Annoyed, he ordered to stop these nonsense, because he was tired of constant lies. Then Ramai calmly addressed the knight, asking her to calm down and explain that he really wants to simply compare the stories of the deceiver Masar and the representative. Calm down a little and tell. A few months ago, after the death of the king, when Princess Lupy was preparing for the coronation, information appeared. It is rumored that she was an illegitimate child with royal blood in veins. Traditionally, the heir born out of marriage is not a wonder for the royal family, however, only if his belonging to the dynasty is confirmed. In the same case, the status of a child who was born out of marriage remained unconfirmed. At that moment, when the first princess announced her desire to rule the kingdom, the head of the aristocrats, the Marquis Zelgard, he made the so-called will of the king. This document referred to the support of the illegitimate child who lived in the next kingdom of mice. The knights who always stayed on the side of the first princess began to suspect that mysterious woman. In the end, a real struggle for the throne broke out between the two camps. The knights who supported Princess Lupy were noted only in the battle, but almost did not understand the internal affairs of the kingdom. Meanwhile, the noble faction enjoyed its advantage and rapidly strengthened positions. While the influence of the knight faction faded and their power weakened, supporters of the noble party only strengthened their position. Suddenly, they became aware that through Marquis Elhoff, ambassadors from the Kingdom of Mice came secretly. The main feature of this girl was silver hair, and it looks like a teenager as possible. He realized correctly. The Kingdom Knights are really going to attack this self-esteem. Michael confirmed it and added that this was their only opportunity to restore justice. She noted that this plan was extremely careless, and even if he was successful, he would not solve any problem. Rayma explained, most likely the knights were just around the finger, and while they chase after a ghostly purpose, an illegitimate baby could already be hidden in a safe place. They also agreed that the nobles deliberately spread false rumors to sow the confusion of that night. Michael, thinking a little, recognized his mistake. It was explained that, in addition to bribery of the guild masters, so that they searched a girl with silver hair, aristocrats also hired a lawyer. They chose for the basis of such an adventure, whose death will not cause any consequences, and he was himself. She realized what a horrible role she had to play in this insidious performance. The girl was explained that she was the main target, and no one could predict that Sarah would become a key figure in the story. He confessed that some moments remained a mystery to him. After all, even after the knights saw an empty crew, they still did not stop chasing and trying to kill them. Michael noted that he did not reject the opportunity that the girl could be masked, so it was unacceptable to retreat and stop the fight. Ramal felt Michael's deep desire to continue the struggle, and at the same time realized how insidious this experienced warrior was deceived. On this basis, it was stated that Bales intentionally hired Marta to destroy the knights and gain the affection of the nobility. He was stunned by such insidiousness of the representative of the Aventurist Guild, and he promised to take revenge on the first opportunity. Looking carefully at the brave commander, the Knight of the Night said that there was no point in worrying about what happened, and then he added, he expected the blow, but was amazed when the rope on his hand suddenly broke under a sharp blade. Reen explained that Michael treacherously deceived the nobility, and now he was in a difficult situation. After that, he asked the night guests to ask whether they could help each other in the future, because their situation was similar. A few days later, the Strands, along with their friends and a few surviving knights, arrived in the capital of the Kingdom of Rhodes Cheese, where they were waiting for an audience in Princess Lupy. She came to the guests and asked everyone to lift their heads to see their faces. Not. She then told the commander Michael that she received a complaint from Maltina today. Unfortunately, this is an unpleasant case, and such a failed knight prevented its task. He decided to meet a look with the princess and immediately realized, in her eyes there was nothing good. Even on the approach to the capital of the Kingdom of Rhodes Ornia because of excessive crushing, a group of adventurers, along with the surviving knights, decided to spend the night in the forest. Ramel heard the angry exclamations of Michael and decided to find out what happened. As it turned out, the commander of the knights quarreled with Lion. A lightweight girl was indignant at Michael, as he can speak of honor after a treacherous ambush. In his defense, Michael replied that he had no choice and acted for the well-being of a legitimate princess. He realized that mercenaries were only interested in their own benefit, and knights, morality and obligation, so it was impossible to reach an agreement between them. He stated that all the knights were only meaningless soldiers and gross strongholds, capable of fighting. Michael was indignant with such humiliating remarks and immediately demanded explanations and apologies. Watch this scandalous situation with interest and ask what dull athletes are. Reem explained to the girl that athletes are those who are guided solely by muscle strength and hardly use the mind. In simple words, such people first act and only then think about the consequences. Such people are also called those who do not think about their actions and are not afraid. It can have both positive and negative consequences. Rora remained a satisfied explanation and realized that in such situations it is possible to act as the heart suggests. She asked her sister what she would do if she had to remain a slave forever. Sarah reminded that they had already discussed this issue, and there was no point in returning to him again. She stated that she was ready to give all her strength to save her sister, and she did not care who she would have to overcome. St. Lupy's was extremely angered by the lost mission, which was commissioned by an experienced Michael commander. He tried to speak with a romance, but he roughly interrupted the girl, ordered her to be silent because there was a princess nearby. Suddenly, Lupy sharply turned to the romance, asking what he was thinking about the whole situation. He replied that he considers this situation extremely dangerous, and that he would not surprise him now, even if he was suddenly attacked. He already realized that the princess was well aware of all the details of the missing mission. Obviously, she thought of getting rid of another princess and trying to hide her plans so as not to spoil her own reputation. Therefore, Lupus may well decide to destroy all witnesses so that no information is leaked out. Then his gaze stopped on the girl of the night, and he came to the conclusion that it was probably that this Melton was the one who conveyed the information. He came to the conclusion that this act of a night girl was at least meaningless. In the end, when she reported the failure of the mission, she skillfully substituted Michael, a man who is unconditionally devoted to Princess Lupus. In such decisive times, a sincere colleague is either careless or a treacherous design. Meanwhile, Hope explained Michael that his mission had cost many knights who sacrificed themselves for the sake of saving the kingdom. Rima realized that if the princess learns that he is guilty of the death of knights, the consequences can be catastrophic. Commander Michael is still alive and is in this hall. So, the chance to complete this meeting still remains. Princess Lupy stated that she had no choice but to execute the Commander Michael because of his failure. His back was pierced. There was almost no chance of getting out alive from this situation. But the princess again impressed everyone, stated that, given that all this turned out to be a cunning trap of the nobility, the execution was delayed indefinitely. The princess told the Commander Michael, who gave him the last chance to justify himself, and gave him a word. Michael solemnly promised to never bring Her Highness and declared his intention to establish a new kingdom. The rabbi sisters whispered with each other, glad that the Commander Michael would remain alive. Meanwhile, the princess did not mention the attack, and did not reveal new details of the mission. Assessing the situation on the other side, Lupy noticed for herself a profitable opportunity. She decided to translate all the blame for the death of many knights on a treacherous trap arranged. Ramao supported the choice made by the princess, and was satisfied with her decision. I realized that this girl was really a great mind. Then Lupy turned to Sarah and asked her to get up. He asked to explain whether Sarah was not really the daughter of King Falls II of Rhodesia. She confidently stated that she had nothing to do with the royal family of that state. She explained that her name was really Malphist, and the girl near her sister, named Roar. Hearing this name, the princess hesitated for a moment, and it became clear that this news was quite interested in it. She confessed that she had already heard that name somewhere in the central part of the continent. It was at this moment that Moulton reminded the princess in a timely manner that the extramarital baby had no sister, so Sarah told the truth. Lupus immediately noticed that the girls were twins, so there was no reason to blame them of lies. She expressed her desire to learn more about Sarah and Rora, and suggested to move this conversation for another time. In the meantime, guests can enjoy the hospitality of the capital of the Kingdom of Rhodes. Fel meets Princess Lupy again and is wondering that it is a gorgeous vase on the table. The princess explained that this valuable vase could be considered a kind of apology for all the inconvenience suffered by Ramiek and his friends. Unfortunately, there are now differences in the country, and some of the measures taken may seem too harsh. Thank you for the valuable item. He reported that he had a proposal to invite Michael's commander to join their ranks. Lupy explains that she takes a little time to think about her decision. Then he apologized for his frankness, and added that in his opinion, in the current situation, Princess Lupus has no chance of winning. One of the faithful subjects of Melting reacted instantly, and promised to deal with the brazen, cutting it in half. In a moment, the sharp blade of the sword was near the neck of Rem, and Melton quenched with fury. How did this common man dream of saying that right before the princess? He should already be grateful at least for being admitted to this hall and allowed to sit next to it. But suddenly, Lupy intervened, asking the girl to calm down and remove the sword from the guest's throat. After the explanation of the deciding the fate of this guy, to live or not, it belongs to the Multine, the girl reluctantly lowered the sword. Lucy, seeing this, smiled again, and asked the girl to repeat her words, once again emphasizing their sense. He explained that if the princess allowed him to join, he and his friends will be able to significantly strengthen the princess's army. The princess responded to this, noting that his words sound too self-confident, and wondered why Rama thought. He decided not to hide his thoughts, and confidently stated that he would be able to bring the princess to a convincing victory. overcoming all the rivals. He noted that this young man was full of confidence and acknowledged that he was still young. She also admitted that she rarely met such people. She wondered if she could completely trust the fact that Romain really adheres to her word. The guy decided to play his role to the end and promised the princess to show all the benefits of this agreement. Princess Lupy quickly agreed to cooperate, and the guy noticed how his two companions joyfully perceived the decision. After that, he gave Rory his most valuable smile. The beauty of the girl noted that this valuable vase would be useful for them, because they need money to help the princess win in the fight for the throne. Lupy looked carefully at the new subordinates and noted that Remus had incredibly committed rabbi. When he met the princess, Roma headed to the room where Lion was. As it turned out, while Roma was discussing important cases with the princess, this mercenary enjoyed royal wine and had already managed well. She explained that she felt extremely lonely and lamented, so she decided to take the opportunity and taste the best royal wine of the Syrian kingdom, because she still did not have such an opportunity. They explained that Lion was in fact looking forward to Remus. However, at that moment, Lion ordered the ball to silence immediately and not to tell unnecessary. This spectacle cheered Brala, and he thanked the girl. However, Lion was already too drunk to hold back emotions and suddenly burst into tears. Then she asked the romance not to touch serious topics and reminded that they could always get closer and make her friends even stronger in a pleasant way. He felt a strong shame and hurried to translate the conversation on another topic. He explained that in the near future he seeks to hire as many mercenaries as possible. And, in addition to the detachment of pink lions, he needs at least half. After reflection, he explained that if the matter is really urgent, then at his current savings, he will need at least 300 gold coins. Promise right away. Fiona explained that they need real money. It is gold coins, not a work of art that can be too expensive and attract extra attention among mercenaries. Ramag agreed with the girl and began to think about where to get such 300 gold. Ramag promised that tomorrow he would find the necessary sum of gold coins, and Lion, giving the word to take care of mercenaries as soon as possible, assured that he would do everything responsibly. She also proposed to celebrate it with royal wine. A meeting between Sato and one of the most influential persons took place in the imperial capital of Altamy. According to the results of this conversation, the man announced that tomorrow he is going on the road. It is time to finally determine the fate of the Kingdom of Rods.